or you might get a little bit. Everyone's different. So, you know, I'm just here to talk about my experience with a women's lacrosse. So currently I do coach the Akwesasne Storm women's midget lacrosse team. My oldest daughter plays for that, funny enough. So that's how I got into that. I play for the Akwesasne Outlaws in the Ontario Women's Box Lacrosse League. I also help coach and manage that team. I'm the current coach for Team Quebec's U16 team that will be attending Canada Games, and I'm the current coach for Team Ontario NAG team, which will be attending NAG in 2021. So that's just a little bit about my coaching background right now. I have been playing a really long time. I've been playing since I was 5 or 6 years old. Back when I was started playing, there was no women's lacrosse or girls lacrosse, so pretty much you joined with the boys. So I started off playing boys field lacrosse and boys box lacrosse. So it's nice that we have women's lacrosse here now. So women's box lacrosse started developing in Canada in the early 2000s, primarily in Ontario. Ontario has a huge number of box lacrosse teams for men, and it made sense, especially with the huge number of Indigenous communities that we have, like Six Nations and Akwesasne. Ganawage is in Quebec, but their teams have played in the Ontario Lacrosse Association pretty much since they started. Sorry. So that doesn't mean that there weren't women or girls playing. In fact, I played boys lacrosse for quite a few number of years. There wasn't that many girls playing when I was growing up, and we'll get into that. This isn't to be confused with the history of women's field lacrosse, which actually started in the 1800s with all female teams. So, I mean, I can always send you more information if you're interested in that as well. But the history of Indigenous females playing the sport, because of our traditional and cultural conflictions, we actually didn't play lacrosse because of that. So as an Indigenous woman, we're not supposed to play because of the fact that it's a medicine game, which a lot of non-native teams are not aware of, which I feel as a woman player, it should be part of the education going into playing lacrosse. So with the teams that I coach, I actually give the girls a little bit of information, like, listen, this is a luxury for you. When I was your age, we didn't have any girls teams, so you need to be respectful of the fact that it is a traditional game. And for a lot of
I can just jump in for a second. First of all, we do have one person from Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is great. Anyone else who wants to share where they're joining us from would be terrific. And I know I've talked to some members of different nations who have pointed out that on some reserves, or with some nations, women aren't supposed to touch sticks, right? That is part of the cultural confliction you're talking about.
Yes, I have teammates that I have played with that do play with the wooden sticks, and they understand like the cultural confliction behind it, and I respect them. They're magnificent players with the wooden sticks. I myself do not play with a wooden stick. I grew up learning on a wooden stick, but once I was old enough to realize the background behind it, I just chose not to. So I play with I use like Nike or whatever. I have like what we call the Tupperware sticks. And that was a huge cultural thing for some people, especially when they get a wood stick and they're so gung-ho about playing with it. They don't understand that technically as a woman, we are not supposed to. And the reasoning behind that is because we give birth. So we bear children, and the tree so we already give life, and a tree is a living thing. That's my interpretation of it. I'm sure someone else might have a different interpretation of it. So there is those traditional and cultural conflictions. I think what would be great is if we did include that information in with teams once they're starting up, and with programs. I know I'm in the Ontario Women's Box Lacrosse League, and they've done a great job of sort of respecting those lines. But our league is also, we have a huge number of Aboriginal women who do play. We have the Grand River Attack. They're fundamentally, they're a Aboriginal, a huge Aboriginal-based team. Akwesasne, Niagara Turtle Islanders. There's other teams as well that have a huge amount of Aboriginal women that also play for them. And you know how we've gone through this hurdle to overcome these is you have to look at the times as well. It is a medicine game, and I try to emphasize that as much as possible when I'm coaching, is that you can use this to help with different things, with your mental, with your health. Everyone's always going through something different, and for a long time boys played this game and this is what they did and it helped them. And you hear all the stories all the time about how lacrosse has saved, from a male perspective, has helped them. So at the same time, as we venture into 2021, this is a great way to look at it as well. And I know, Stephen, you were with the Peterborough Lakers, and you seen the Aboriginal woman take the game very seriously. Not just in not just in like the aggression of it, but also in the respect that you should have on the floor. I'm not saying that there hasn't been dramatics or conflicts, but for the most part, we understand. And the great thing is that the non-native players that come in and play with us, they also gain that respect because we teach them along the way. So it's a win across the board. With the history of women's box lacrosse, I started doing research, and at least 5 different provinces host women's and girls box lacrosse. There are way more than that. There's some information I could not find. I had the privilege of attending a women's conference back in March in Ottawa through the Canadian Lacrosse Association, and it was a women's only conference, and it's for all the coaches that will be attending Canada Games for 2021. So you had Team Quebec there, you had Team Manitoba, Team Nova Scotia, Team BC, Team Ontario. You had all these magnificent women who will be stepping on a bench to coach these teams. And what we learn from each other is like what their issues may be in their area to promote lacrosse, what are their barriers. And because Ontario has like a large base for women's lacrosse. I mean, our girls program, Peterborough, Whitby, Six Nations, Akwesasne, we all have girls programs. So any information that we could help to promote lacrosse to another province, I mean, it was great. It was such a great sit down. With the Ontario Women's Box Lacrosse League alone, we have 9 teams current. So, and I know Peterborough, huh?
Sorry, I was going to say at the conference, you mentioned that earlier when we were chatting, the women's conference, the coaches conference, and you said you were able to talk about what the barriers were. We also, by the way, have Robin in from Cambridge, Ontario. Very cool.
Okay.
But I was wondering, you said you got to see the barriers that everyone had and what they were. I was wondering if they were largely similar in the different geographical regions, or if different people had really different issues.
Actually, it is. What's interesting is that a lot of the barriers that we have are really, it's not even about the sport per se. The barriers that we have, and we have it across the board, is, a lot of times it's money. The fact that lacrosse costs so much to play, it's getting equipment to fit these girls. It's getting parents to buy into the idea of their daughter playing a very aggressive game, which I will get into. I will touch upon that again throughout the PowerPoint, but it's all these different factors, and they're all very similar. And like I explained to him, and not every coach has the ability or the capabilities to do what I did last year. But last year I had 5 field lacrosse girls that I had coached in previous years. I said, hey, you want to come try box lacrosse? They didn't have a field team to play for. They said, we don't have equipment. Hold up, give me 2 days, and I was able to get the equipment for them. But
where did you get the equipment?
I started emailing people. I honestly have a huge collection of equipment here. My husband's very pissed off half the time because there's a huge amount of equipment lying around. I have about 10 lacrosse sticks. I remember last year I gave out 5 lacrosse sticks that I just had. I was like, here, your daughter can keep them. But not all provinces have that capabilities. One of the big barriers that I seen in a discussion was that maybe their province didn't have lacrosse stores like we had. Maybe they had to outsource for their lacrosse equipment, which means they're getting it shipped in, they're getting it flown in. What if it doesn't fit the player? Then they're out that money. So that is also, I think the monetary part of it is a huge issue. And if we could somehow if we could somehow contact like Canadian Lacrosse Association, I know they've been pretty good about building the lacrosse programs and supporting them. I think if we could figure out a way, I believe that girls lacrosse will grow tenfold. I mean,
Right.
girls lacrosse by itself is one of the fastest rising sports in Canada right now.
And there are times I know, like, where it's part of it. Sometimes it depends on having people like yourself who can get the equipment, who can. We live in Buckhorn, but we were, until a couple months ago, we were living in Peterborough, and our neighbor they had a girl who, a daughter who's about 10 or so, 9 or so, I guess, and she was out with her lacrosse stick, just playing some wall ball. I was like, "Hey, you want to play catch?" So we were playing catch. I said, "It's a pretty nice stick." She's like, "Oh, thanks. It's my coach gave it to me." I was like, "Oh, who's your coach?" She's like, "Sean Evans." And it's like, that's pretty lucky when you have, a 9-year-old girl and you get Sean Evans coaching you. And it's now Sean's daughter, their oldest daughter, Peyton, is on the team. So he's coaching that team. And you see that so often, people like yourself get into coaching their kids' teams. And that's how a lot of times girls get access to getting the equipment, or boys. I mean, as a youngster, but for girls, it does seem like such an issue to get the gear to them. So I think one of the things you're getting at is we need to find ways other than happening to know you or know Sean Evans or someone, ways to get the equipment to them. We also, by the way, have Rachel Valarelli here from Hartsdale, New York. So an
How you
international
doing,
flavor
Rachel?
to this.
Yeah, she's a really good field lacrosse goalie. Actually, I was trying to get her to come out for the Arena Lacrosse League, but she didn't bite on it for one of the women's teams. But that's all right. I do
I know
know
she
though.
had she was having some chats with some of the men's teams too. She's still looking at playing some men's lacrosse, because she's quite an accomplished box goalie as well.
I know I did get lucky. Well, Mike Thompson is from Akwesasne, and I'm friends with him. And I needed a goalie stick. My goalie didn't have the right stick, and I said, nonchalantly, I said, "Hey, would you happen to have any extra sticks lying around at home?" And he said, "You know what? Let me see what I got, and I'll let you know." Well, he brought a brand new stick to my next practice. His son played before us. He's like, "Here, you can have this for your goalie." And I mean, and I would have went out and got it for her if absolutely necessary. And her parents are really great people. They would have got her whatever she needed to. But I do know how much it costs to play all by itself. So I think if we can somehow figure out the way to help diminish the cost and how to help parents pay for equipment, that's two battles right there that we've won. And everything else we can figure out after that. Um, Ontario has a great girls minor system, and our numbers keep growing. So I'd like to see that for every other province as well that's trying to start off. I know I'm super impressed with Canada Games because, they've really put it to the forefront to have every province have a team there to represent them. And I think that's something that's wonderful. And I hope to God that, we can actually see that as have a province at least have a girls team, even if it's not building to a women's team. But eventually, the interest is out there. You just got to get players and parents to buy into the
Yeah, and
system.
we had a quick chat earlier in the day that was supposed to be a quick chat and turned into a fairly long chat about that, and how it's so important to get to start with the kids and get them playing, and then give them somewhere to go. So have if you've got a novice team, have a Pee Wee team for them to go to, then have a bantam team, then have a midget team, have an intermediate team, have a junior team. Well, there's not really women's junior; it goes intermediate to senior, but have places for them to progress. So it's not like, oh, I'm really loving this, and then there's nothing to do next year or the year after once you age out of a group.
Yep. And I think one of the things too is I think we need to look at building more girl-based teams. I mean, I grew up playing with the boys, totally different time, totally different generation of people that I grew up with. But now I think if we can start the girls a lot earlier, I think that skill difference you see from a girl who might start playing at Pee Wee compared to a boy who started at novice or tyke, you might see them start leveling up, and it might be very comparable as time goes on. I mean, it's not going to happen this year or next year, but I think if you give it a 10-year plan, I think what we'll see is if we can start doing girl-based teams, man, the skill level that's out there, that the potential is just amazing. And I know when people will say, well, like, how do you find players to fill your program, or how do you know, last year I had 13 girls going in for my midget team. I said, no, this isn't gonna work. And so I wanted 18 players. And both of the goalies that I had, I told them right away, I said, if you're a goalie, we have two of you. One of you will be playing out. If you're not playing goalie, you're gonna be a runner. And it worked out great. Both my goalies could score. It was amazing. So finding players, I said, well, I need 5 more girls. I want 5 more girls to make an 18-man roster. I started messaging some of my daughter's teammates and their parents, and there was no go on that one. They had all signed up for soccer and softball by that point. But I found 5 girls who played field lacrosse for me before, and they were just itching to play. So when you're looking at what sport skills transfer over, you're looking at that 5 base game. So you're looking at hockey and basketball. Field lacrosse isn't a 5-player base game, but the skills that are there, stick, running, everything you need, minus that hitting aspect of it. So for girls, a lot of it is getting them over that hitting aspect. I know I have a teammate, her name's Miquan Telpin, and I'm pretty sure she's watching right now. But hell, she can hit. Like when I used to play against her, I'd be like, nope, I ain't running into that girl. But you know, not every player plays like that, and you have to think about teaching them how to roll off of hit, and that's what a coach's job is. Yeah, you're gonna find those players that can really, really hit, but how are you gonna take that hit? How are you gonna roll off of it? So a lot of parents, they look at box lacrosse and they say, well, it's so aggressive. It's so aggressive. There's so much hitting, but we're wearing equipment. If you have a good coach, the coach is teaching proper techniques. It's not as aggressive as, you know, as you may think.
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself for a second because I just needed to check. I think that might be our smoke detector that's beeping here. I'm not sure, but it's interesting. You know, you mentioned McQuan, and we talked about that earlier. That when I was helping coach Peterborough, she, I mean, it would drive our players nuts because she has this a move. It's a person, she runs in, somebody comes to check her, and they're not balanced. She puts their shoulder into them, and she would knock our players flat, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's not fair. No, that's dirty." I'm like, "No, that's just tough. Like that's just a good play. You
Yep.
have to adjust. That's not on her. She's playing well. You need to make the adjustment." And we'd work on that. We'd work on, this is what you do when she comes to do that. Here's ways to address that. And the great thing that you're bringing them is an ability to coach them in how to do this, how to handle both the skill and the physical side of the game, which is great, because that is one of the issues, right? Is that you mentioned that it's more physical compared to other games, and a lot of girls' sports there isn't the same level of contact, unless you've got girls who are playing rugby or something.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily used to the same level of physical contact.
Even with girls hockey, they don't have contact in it.
Yeah.
Not until they hit midget. They might have a little pushing and shoving. So when you have like my daughter's 14, and last year was her first year of actually playing box lacrosse. I mean, she played when she was young, like young, and then she did a span of field lacrosse. But in terms of hockey, she wasn't hitting. So when she got to box lacrosse, and no matter how many times she's seen me play or how many games she's gone to throughout the course of the years, she still didn't take a hit right the first time she played. And I remember the first time she got laid out, I sort of chuckled to myself. At first I laughed, and then I was concerned because I want to know, how did she take it? And she got up and she said, I'm fine. Like, you know, I know next time I have to do this, I have to do that. So it's just looking at that too. And a lot of people think hockey is an aggressive sport, but there's no hitting for girls. It doesn't matter what level they go to. I mean, you can watch, if you watch Team Canada for women's, and you watch Team Canada for men's, there's no hitting for women. A great game, but that aggression that the men have in their game is not there. So you have to teach them that in box lacrosse, how to take a hit. And you know, some girls, you'll find out real quick if they like getting hit or if they don't like getting hit.
Mhm.
But you also have to keep them interested in the game too. So you have to teach them. I teach them the medicine game of it, because my team is Aboriginal that I coach here. I don't think there was any non-native girls on my team this past season, due to the cultural aspect of lacrosse. It's a great medicine game for women, especially in this day and age. I mean, I can give you a great story that actually happened recently for me. I play in the Arena Lacrosse League, based out of Six Nations, and I play for. At the time, I was playing for the Oshawa Outlaws, and my mom just so happened she passed away from lung cancer, and that following weekend, we had a game, and our whole league stepped out, and they stepped up, and we had another member of the lacrosse community, Rusty Dockster, had passed at the same time, and they did like a nice little moment of silence. And that's just the great thing that happens in lacrosse. It doesn't matter what team you're playing for. You have that respect for each other, you gain it. And I think that's a huge difference between other sports and lacrosse. The opportunities to play are amazing. Provincial tournaments in your province, nationals, Canada Games, which is taking place in 2021, Indigenous Games, NAG for eligible players. And then I just came across a new tournament just the other day when I was doing research. USA Box Law also has a girls division. So, I mean, there's just so many amazing opportunities and places that young women can play. And I think if every province had a girls program, or were able to build a program, they'd be able to capitalize on creating a women's program once those players aged out.
Yeah, you mentioned the Canada Games and how a lot of the coaches were at the conference that you're at. And I was wondering how many provinces, if you know yet, how many provinces are entering teams in the Canada Games next year?
I want to say there were 6 or 7 of us there from our respective provinces. I know I was representing Team Quebec. Team Ontario was there. Team BC, Nova Scotia, Alberta, and I'm probably missing 1 or 2. But there was
Did you
there was
say
quite a few
Manitoba
of us.
before?
Huh?
Did you say Manitoba?
Yeah, I said Manitoba.
Okay. So half a dozen. I do have a question before we jump on to the next step, if you don't mind. Steve White was asking if we should eliminate boys and girls lacrosse. I think the distinction, having separate boys and girls teams is what he means. Because he says there's not a physical difference between girls and boys before age 13. Just let them play. What do you think about that?
Well, from a coach's perspective, because I grew up playing boys lacrosse, it is it's different, right? So a lot of the skills and things that I learned early on, as a player, girls that are midget age, they're learning at a greater rate. Now, I wouldn't say no. I actually I coach field lacrosse, and I was in a meeting, and there was a young girl who wanted to play for the boys team. And it was the only time I ever got upset in like the 4 or 5 years that I'd coached for the program, is they said absolutely not. Even though there's a girls team, if they really want to play that bad, they can go play for the girls team. It's the same sport. And I said, no, it's not. It's really not the same sport. There's different things that boys do compared to girls. And they ended up not letting her play. They ended up refunding her money. And to be honest, I wish they would have just let her play
Wow.
with the
Yeah.
boys. I think it should be a choice. Some girls may not be comfortable playing with the boys, but if you start them early enough, they don't even know the difference. It's like playing with their friends at the playground. So if you have tight players, boys and girls playing together, they're not going to know that they're not really going to be playing together later on in life. I say start them if you need to, just to get girls playing.
Cool. All right, I'll let you get back to your your presentation.
Okay, well, the great thing about lacrosse, and it's the same across all sports. I mean, it becomes a family to you. So I played for Akwesasne for quite a few years, and then I ended up going to Grand River Attack for a couple years in the Ontario Women's Box Lacrosse League. And you know what? When I came back to Akwesasne, all those girls are still my lacrosse sisters. They're all still my friends. We talk all the time. I can go up to Six Nations, and I can go to anybody's house and I still correspond with them. And you know what? That's the great aspect about lacrosse. And a lot of us understand it, it's respect. And it's not even about playing together, you can even play against each other. I know at provincials, Samantha, I can't remember what her last name is, but there's a coach, her name's Samantha, she's from Six Nations. She also coaches the midget girls team out there. And so what we started doing when we would enter tournaments, which is what girls do, we don't really have, you know, games like the boys do. We do tournaments. And what we started doing, we started getting our teams together and making them run out together. And I remember we were at this tournament, I believe it was in Oshawa, the Oshawa Girls Got Game Chicks with Sticks tournament. And we did our thing, and I got off the floor to go on my bench, and a team that had just came off the floor was watching us, and they're like, why don't we do that? That is so cool. So for us to do that, not even consciously thinking about what the other people are visually seeing, we sort of created like that idea, right? That lacrosse we're not just opponents, we're also family members too. And I remember there's a couple players that got hurt from another team. I ran out there too to see if they needed assistance. You know, she got hurt pretty bad. And someone said, why did you do that? You don't even coach that team. It's just respect. Yeah. It's just respect.
We're all part of the bigger lacrosse family.
Yeah. And so going into that, my next slide, and teaching your female players, you know, respect for the game and respect for each other. Girls are a little bit more emotional than boys are. That's just the logistics of it. My daughter's standing on the other side going like this, like, I don't know what you're talking about. She knows perfectly well what I'm talking about. They're just a little bit more emotional. So when you teach them respect for the game, so as a coach, the one thing I don't deal with is bullying in the team. And that doesn't mean just bullying when you're at practice or you're at games or in the locker room. That means during the time that I'm coaching you, I don't want it to be happening at school. I don't want it to be happening at social media. I don't want it to be happening on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And that's a huge thing that we need to be teaching young women, is that, you know, not only should you be respecting yourself, you should be also respecting your teammates on the floor and off the floor. Not just respect your teammates, respect your opponents. You know, there's no time for that emotional stuff that comes to the floor. Whatever your issues are, you leave them at home. So that's a huge thing I attempt to do. It doesn't always work. Everyone has their own personality. For a lot of us coaches, we get involved with coaching because our children play. And what I love seeing right now is that the level of coaching staff for female sports is moms who maybe played or their sons played, and they have that experience and background. And I think that's fantastic. I totally believe in more women on the bench. And the more we get, the better off it is going to be. I'm not going to knock a male coach, but we have so many women players now that as they age out, I mean, I'm almost 40, I have 2 bad knees. Coaching permanently is just the next level, you know? So I got involved because my daughter plays, and I don't regret anything about it.
And it's so important for girls to be able to see women as coaches, as role models, and saying there's another step in their progression. And again, like you said, nothing against, I mean, they're in Peterborough, if it wasn't for PJ Johnston, there probably wouldn't have been a team. You know, he was coaching and he made such a difference for them. John Dalgleish, the work he did with the Toronto Stars. I mean, there are lots of men who have done great things for the women's game, and we don't want to take away from that in the slightest. But if it's all men's coaches, what does that say to the girls who are playing right now, you know, in terms of the future?
Especially in Ontario, when you look at it, with if you have, like in our Ontario Women's Box Lacrosse League, we have 9 teams current. At one point, we had Peterborough Lakers in our team. Clarington Gales they didn't play. They weren't going to play this season, and we also had the Gunawaga Hawks before. So when you look at it, that's 11 teams. 12 teams at one point in time were in our league. Well, for those 12 teams, you have 20 players. So that means there's 20 women out there somewhere, you know, from each team who could be coaching teams. And you don't even have to be a parent. I remember the first year I ever coached girls box lacrosse, I didn't even have a child old enough to play. My oldest child at the time was 4 years old. I had a baby who was still in a stroller. I was playing women's at the time, and someone said, hey, you want to come coach? I'm like, I don't even have a kid who plays. My own nieces and nephews didn't even play at the time. But I stepped up, and And you know what? I don't regret anything about it. I'm very passionate about lacrosse. So I think you also have to have that too. When you are a coach, you have to be passionate about it, and you have to show the players that you want to be there and that you're willing to teach them. Because when you don't, the dropout rate for a sport is very high. And that's not just for girls. I see it all the time for boys too. I have a huge difficulty with the team 1 and team 2 things that they do in Ontario, because it's saying team 1's your stack team, we're the all-stars, and team 2 is what. And I always believe that if you make these teams equal, you'll see a lot better representation on the floor. You'll see a bigger growth for boys lacrosse too, because players will start leveling up. But I mean, that's my own personal opinion. Fortunately, we don't have that issue for girls. For team 1 and team 2, whoever signs up is who plays. But I've been fortunate and blessed to coach some really amazing young women and to come in contact with some amazing young women. For last year, I was able to help with the intermediate girls team as well. And you know, all those girls are immensely talented and skilled in lacrosse. So I look forward as a woman player and a woman's coach to see them come up the ranks and start playing too. So
that's how people can get in touch with Hannah. You can see her email address there, hannah.leaf3@gmail.com. Facebook on Hannah Claire. Make sure you remember the H at the end of Hannah. And we've had a few questions, but we want to really open it up to any questions anyone has. And I've got a few, but just put them in the Q&A section, and I will relay them to Hannah for sure. And I also want to ask, we've talked about the number of provinces. There are a number of provinces that have programs. There, we had the gathering for the women coaches for the Canada Games and things. And I'm curious what you think are the steps that are needed to get all the provinces involved, or at least have more broad spread programs in the provinces that have them. Have the games spread in the United States for girls and women, and what do we need to do to make opportunities so that we can have more chances for girls to just start playing?
I think one of the big things we have to look at, which we touched upon earlier, is the monetary part of it. It is an expensive sport. By no means necessary is it going to be cheap. You're traveling in the summer months, which is all expensive by itself, especially with girls lacrosse. When you're not playing consistent games like the boys do, it's a lot of tournaments. That's hotels, that's food. It starts adding up, right? So looking at how to get those costs taken care of. Also, the buy-in for parents. A lot of times the players are totally interested. They're totally buying into the process, into learning the game. And it's the parents who are looking at it and saying, well, my son might have something here. And I hate to say that, but I've seen it. I grew up in a boy-girl household. I had a brother who played lacrosse, and I was the girl who was sort of put on the back burner, not on purpose, but I had cousins that stepped up and took that role. So I was looking, that support system. Who do you have support? In terms of growing it in the different provinces, having a group of skilled coaches come in and maybe do a little clinic, maybe a weekend clinic, or a week-long clinic, in the summertime, to help them grow it and see what happens, and then follow up with them. So, you create this. A lot of time what happens is you have a clinic and then there's no follow-up on it. So doing that follow-up, making sure that they have things in place to help support them. Who do they have in their area to support them? Do they have NLO players in their area? Do they have different things that they could my dogs are fighting. Do they have different things that they have in place that they could access? And the great thing is, I know there was one young lady that I was speaking to at the women's conference. Well, they for Saskatchewan actually, and they were friends with someone from one of the teams, and they were able to get equipment that way, and I think that's fantastic. So who do you have to rely on for support? And people don't understand how big girls lacrosse is here in Ontario. I remember I had NAG tryouts back in March, And I didn't even count the girls that were there. I didn't even count the number of girls that were there. It wasn't until I seen a parent's photo that there was 32 girls at tryouts. I had 4 goalies and the rest were all players. And I was like, wow, we have 32 girls. So a lot of it's getting that interest out there. And I can see provinces building, but people don't realize girls box lacrosse is really one of the fastest rising sports. Our numbers, if you look at them compared to boys, are increasing. Um, and that's just, you know, in Canada. But if you look at lacrosse in the United States, and I'm not saying your kid's going to get a scholarship or anything, but girls field lacrosse has the best, girls field lacrosse and hockey have the best high school to college ratio. So when you look
Yeah,
at,
there are tons of opportunities.
when
Is it
you look
okay?
at, yeah, we have a puppy who's like very tries to be the boss. It's not working out for her. But if you look at all the different numbers, I mean, I could build it up for anybody any different way. I'm always, and I know I don't know everything, but you know, as a coach, I'm always doing what I can to learn more. I mean, I watch NLL videos. I talk to people. Right now, I'm going from my level 3 in coaching, which is part of attending Canada games as a coach. So even that by itself, I remember I was telling you on the phone, it's almost like a college course. It's almost like I'm back at Carleton University for psychology because the information is so extensive.
What have
So
you gotten from that training? I mean, going to the level 3, we talked about how, you know, you were mentioning earlier today that doing the level 1 is great. If you want to start coaching, if you don't know that much about the sport, but you're keen, your kids are in whatever, do the level 1 and it'll prepare you to start coaching. But like you said, you know, doing the level 2 and then on to the level 3, I've done that. It's a lot more involved. And what have you taken from that, and how has that affected the way that you coach and what you're able to share with your players?
well, a lot of what I learned, well, there was one thing that I did learn, and you know, I started coaching, and it was when I would create my plans and stuff, I was basing it on, you know, how I've been coached in the past. And to realize that there's a whole formula to how to coach properly was just amazing. Like you know, well, maybe this practice plan, you want your players to become faster runners, so you're working on this. You might want your players to work on this skill, so you're working on this. So every practice plan wasn't geared for all these different things. It was doing all these different things to lead up to the skill that you wanted them. And then once you got to that, then it was just maintenance. And also I mean, the nutritional stuff, it was that was common sense things, but also the physical part of it, like what's happening to their bodies in this moment. They're doing 30-second shifts. What's happening to them in that 30-second shift with their body, with their lactic acid and everything else like that. All that stuff was information. I mean, I was just a lacrosse player who coached, and you know, I wasn't even thinking about all that stuff. So I was just thinking, like, you know, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's been working. But then to learn that there are other things that I can incorporate in my own coaching style that will actually benefit the players, you know. And I think that's fantastic as a coach to be able to learn that stuff, and then to implement it. I mean, not just for my players, but I can take that to my women's team as a player myself.
Mm-hmm.
Say, like, I know why this is happening, you know, try this. And the benefit of going for that level, I mean, if you can do it, I mean, it's amazing. It's just so much coursework. It's Sometimes I look at it like that's my binder.
It's a thick binder for the level 3. You have to do an annual plan as
Yep.
part of it, which did. So there's a lot, you know, you have to look at cycling and macro systems and micro systems and things. It is pretty interesting. We have actually a question from Miquan, and she's saying, yeah, women's box lacrosse is growing, but what do you have to say for women two women who are hesitant about continuing after they finish intermediate, or who may be hesitant because they haven't played, they're thinking about joining late into their 20s, but they're a little nervous because they haven't played and they're joining. And I can tell you, we had on the Peterborough team that I helped coach, there were a lot of women, probably the majority, were starting the game in their 20s. And there's definitely some challenges. And so many of them just picked it up and became so passionate and got so much out of it. So, I mean, I know my feeling is it's a great opportunity and you're going to love it, but you've been intimately involved. What would you say to that?
Well, I actually started playing in the women's when I was 23. So I went for a very long time without playing. Once I stopped playing in the minor system, which was probably right before the boys got supremely bigger than me. I think my last year was Bantam. So I was 23, 24 when I started playing again, and I was hesitant at first. I'm gonna get hurt. I'm chubby, like I'm not in shape. I'm in my partying years. How am I gonna go about that? But I found that my love for the sport surpassed any and all issues that I personally had with it. I mean, I've seen some really amazing players start in their late 20s. Um, um, there's a girl that I played with for Grand River. Her name is uh, Jocelyn, and she's not super, like, she's not late. I don't think she's late 20s. She might be her mid 20s, but her first year playing, watching her pick up a stick, and she brought her cousin out with her, and or her friend out with her, and they both picked it up really well. I mean, and at first, when you talk to them, they would say, I was hesitant about coming to play, but I mean, Joss she picked it up so quick. She's an amazing player, an amazing transition player. I say if you can get a woman to come out and try lacrosse, I believe that once they're past that, if they're willing to come out and try it, you've already won your first battle. It's just getting them to buy into the rest of it. And I know my own friend Maria, she's older too. She started playing, and I remember I was working one day and I had to run to the store, which was right near my place of work, and I seen her busting her butt across the parking lot. And I went and chased her down. I said, "Hey, you want to come play lacrosse?" And she's like, "Oh, I can't play lacrosse. I've never even touched a stick before." And I said, "That's okay. Running's half the battle. If you can run away from them, you can play lacrosse." Like, and she plays now, and she's going into her fourth season. She's come to all with me to play, and once she bought into the whole process and the love, I mean, she has love for the sport. Maybe not as much as I do, which is a lot, but she'll say, I can't wait for lacrosse season. I can't wait. Um, if you have Once you get past that hesitation, if you get a woman to try it, if you can get them to buy in to try it, you've won. I honestly believe that.
And as you're looking ahead to to Canada Games and other things, like how big a deal is that to have? And we touched on it before, but to me that's huge that the Canada Games are happening and they've got girls lacrosse as well. Because when I went to the Canada Games for rowing, boys lacrosse was in it. There was a very good Ontario team that when I was still living in Ontario at that point, it was before I went out to BC for quite a while. But there was the boys teams, but now having the girls in, it really gives an opportunity for something. Again, you talked about the tournaments you get to go to, and there's some things, but they are limited. I mean, there aren't the same breadth of opportunities probably yet for girls because there just aren't the same number of leagues and the same structure in place. So the Canada Games strikes me as a huge step in that direction.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know when I got asked to coach, I was they didn't tell me what it was for exactly at first. They just said, "Hey, someone gave us your name, referred us to you to coach." And then once I started getting more information, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, this is an actual tournament?" And I was like, "Man, like, I wish we had had this when I was a young player." It's unfortunately we didn't. Even with NAG, there was no girls lacrosse, and now there is. So huge steps in that direction. But Canada Games, I think this will be a really good opportunity to showcase the game of box lacrosse, especially amongst girls. And I see the numbers growing huge after this. I honestly believe that because it's based in Ontario too, and Ontario is such a plethora of players anyways, I really see a surgence of players joining lacrosse after they see girls are playing in their respective provinces. And especially if, like, say a province like let's say British Columbia comes in with their girls program, and maybe they whoop everyone's butt. Maybe they come in and whoop Team Quebec and Team Ontario, and they're gonna go back to their province and say, "Look it, we got gold." And I think that will also, they'll say, like, "Look at this sport. This is what you can also do in the future." And we shouldn't just look at like tournaments for now, like what's going to happen from Canada Games. You need to look at the broad spectrum of it and say like, this is the big picture. Yes, Canada Games will happen in 2021, but what's going to happen after that?
Yeah, where do you go after? I mean, it's always steps. And just a point, for anyone who's not familiar with NAG, it's NAIG, the National Aboriginal Indigenous Games,
North
North
American.
American Indigenous Games, right? So you've got you've got representatives from all across Canada and the U.S., the various territories.
Yeah, like well, for girls there'll probably be Team Ontario, there's Team EDN, which is Eastern Door, which is like the Quebec sector, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, British Columbia, Saskatchewan. Most Indigenous nations that are out that way put a team in. I'm actually coaching Team Ontario's U19 team for NAG, which I'm pretty excited about all opportunities in terms of coaching. So I mean, you go out and you see these young women play. And let me tell you something, the skill level, the talent that they have is just beyond amazing, because I don't think us women players that are playing now, I don't think we'll be able to touch them once they enter the women's sector. Like once they hit women's, like their skill level is just above us. It's just we set the path for them. We gave them something to go to, and what they're bringing up is just everything that maybe we had been missing, because when we started playing, we didn't have the girls programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a woman my age didn't play girls, but the woman coming up, man, they've been playing, and they're skilled. I mean, I went and watched intermediates play at provincials while I was coaching the midget team, and the level of talent that's there is just amazing. And you see in the midgets too how quick they pick it up. The Bantam age girls that play with the midgets girls, they level up real quick. I mean, and that's what I try to emphasize all the time is like because the numbers are so low in different age groups like Bantams and midgets, it is a combined team. But I mean, I think once we have those numbers, once girls see how great this game is, or they even come out and try it, I see the numbers being enough for a Bantam only and a midget only team. I know my daughter plays with a young lady who gets lots of penalties every hockey game. And I told her mom one day, her mom was like, I don't know what's wrong with her, and she's always getting penalties. I'm like, send her to lacrosse this summer. She can get out all her aggression. And they were gonna, like, until the coronavirus hit, they were interested in getting her to come play. And I honestly believe she would have been a very good player. She would have picked it up very quickly.
Miquan just pointed out the NAG in 2017 in Toronto, and I know she was very involved in that. She had a pretty big role with that tournament, or that event. So it's obviously not just lacrosse; it's all different sports. But it was the first time they had women's box lacrosse as part of the NAG. Was in 2017. They hadn't had women's lacrosse at all since 2005 in Denver, and when they had it before, it was field. So it's very cool that women's box is in. I mean, that's a whole debate, box versus field, which people be playing, but there is clearly the passion for the box side amongst many of us.
Yes, and Miquan, she plays field and box. She's a magnificent player in both of those sports. I mean, if you come watch her in a box game, you will see the immense benefit of being a field lacrosse player transitioning over. Her hand-eye coordination and skills is just it's not comparable to anybody else really, unless they've also played field. I mean, she can switch hands like nobody's business. 9 times out of 10, the goalie don't even know the ball is going to be shot. So, I mean, we always get a good chuckle when she switches in front of the net and scores, because we're like, yep, that's her field player coming out. But field to box is a great transition. Box to field is a great transition. You have those basic skills already that are easily transferable. And as I get older, I kind of like field a little bit more, because there's not as much contact as box. But that's just my personal preference. And to be honest, I didn't even start playing women's lacrosse or women's field lacrosse until about 5-6 years ago. I always played boys when I was growing up, and then I played women's box. So to learn that game, I mean, I have a lot of respect for the field lacrosse girls, because it does take an immense level of skill to play field lacrosse. The rules are different. Even the catching and passing is different. So, you know, the benefits of being a field lacrosse player transition to box lacrosse, well, you know, you're bringing in skills already that a lot of girls that have only played box lacrosse haven't seen.
I think we're going to wrap up unless, Hannah, if you have anything else you want to add. I know we've got through your presentation. Has anything else come up for you while we've been chatting, or with any of the questions that have come up?
I wrote stuff down before we came in, and I know like the one thing I remember, the CLA had a AGM a couple years ago. It's probably like within the last 10 years, and I remember Gary Gate had made a quote there, and it said, you know, everyone asked him, you know, your Team Canada women's team come through and they swamp everybody all the time. They're just killing teams left and right. Why do you think that is? And he made a good point. He said a majority of my field lacrosse players play box lacrosse. They're from Canada and they played box lacrosse. And I think that is very true. Box lacrosse teaches a great form of aggression. And if you can harness that aggression as a field lacrosse player and, you know, tone it down a bit where you're not hitting girls, but you're using those, you get a really great all-around female lacrosse player.
Excellent. I just want to thank Hannah. First of all, we want to thank our sponsors. I forgot to do it at the beginning, so I apologize for that. But this event is, the Global Lacrosse Summit, is possible in part because of the support of Apex Lacrosse Events, Uncommon Fit, Manitoba Lacrosse, Sticks and Picks Podcast, the PAR Team, Major Series Lacrosse, and Bear Paw Lacrosse Events. And thanks to everyone who came and for being part, McQuan for contributing so substantially in the Q&A.
Yes.
And
she's magnificent.
She is. She's. I'm a big fan. Have been for a long time. Having coached against her, she was a nightmare because she's a very difficult athlete to stop. Because, like you said, she's got the combination of talent and the physical drive and just the mental drive, the desire to go out and be a good player.
And she's just a really wonderful human being. Like outside of lacrosse too, like you couldn't meet a sweeter individual than Meeks. And she's probably like watching, like, you know, like
shaking her head because you're talking about.
Yeah, but in terms of lacrosse players, especially as a player myself, I mean, she's never been my foe. Even playing on another team, she's always been, you know, if I fell down or was hurt or whatever, she's the type of player that would come over and check on you type deal. And, you know, that's what you want to see in a women's sport, especially we're mothers and we're sisters and we're aunties and we're daughters, you know, and at the end of the day, how we treat each other is really what matters. So she's just a wonderful person, and I'm actually, she's a good friend too. So, you know, I can talk about her that way. I know her a little bit better. But yeah, and you know, I've seen some amazing players, and Miquan's one of them. Another girl, actually, I wish I don't even have any videos of her, but there was a young woman that played in the league. I'm not sure if you were with Peterborough, Stephen, when she played, but Becky Smith. Mm-hmm. She was an amazing player. She was an amazing player. I mean, she literally could have played with the men. She had amazing stick skills, could score from anywhere. I remember one time we had all five players on her. We couldn't get the ball from her. She just drove you crazy. So if you're a woman who's seen that type of skill level, or a young woman who's seen that type of skill level, it makes you want to kind of play. Like, mm-hmm. I want to do that. I want to be that. And that's the type of role models we should be looking for out on the floor.
And the players and the teams are so welcoming that anyone who's considering it, getting themselves or their daughters into the game, I would strongly encourage it. And Hannah, you give so much of yourself to the game as well. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this presentation, to prepare it and come on, and for the chat earlier. It was great to get to talk and just go over everything earlier in the day, and just for everything that you do for as a coach and a player, and to help others enjoy the game as well.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. That'll be it. Thanks, everyone. Remember, lots more great presentations coming throughout the rest of this week and next week at the Global Lacrosse Summit.
Bye.